This is Hannibal back here from the Hannibal TV.com with another UFO related interview with a returning guest who was the publicist for the recent highly successful Contact in the Desert convention that I really hope to make it out to for the 2025 version. And he is also the author of two new books up on the screen now, which we are going to get into. Dan Harary, how are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm
All the way
doing
from Hollywood.
actually technically all the way from Beverly Hills, but Hollywood's Hollywood's close. I'm doing great, man. Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be with you again.
You live in Beverly Hills. What's that like?
Well, this is my office in my home, and this is in Beverly Hills. I'm not a millionaire. I'm not rich. I live in an apartment building. I do live in the I live in the heart of Beverly Hills. So I always feel guilty, Devin, because it's like my zip code is 90210. So it's like, yeah, you live in Beverly Hills, yeah, but I'm not rich. I mean, I walk 5 miles every other day, past the most magnificent mansions on the planet Earth, and when I walk, they have these Hollywood tour buses go by, and people are like waving to me and taking pictures like I'm Ringo Starr or somebody famous, and I'm thinking, you poor bastards, I'm just like you. I work full time. I work my ass off. I'm not a millionaire. I just happen to live here. So not everybody who lives in Beverly Hills is a millionaire, but it's a lovely city to live in.
How long have you lived there for?
I've been in LA 44 years. I've been in Beverly Hills 21 years. And what's cool about Beverly Hills logistically is that from where I live on Doheny Drive at Olympic. Okay, so from where I live to the valley, to downtown LA, to like LAX, or to the ocean. Okay, at east, northeast, southwest, any of those 4 points, Devin, from where I live from my apartment building is 45 minutes or less. I am centrally located in all of Los Angeles. So that's partly the reason I ended up here, because I have meetings with clients all over Southern California. And it's like, God, it's great. Within 45 minutes, I can get anywhere I need to go.
As far as running into celebrities, has it changed much over the years now that everyone has cell phone cameras? Are they out less or are they protected more than they were, let's say, in the 80s and 90s? Would you be more common to like run into some when you're out about the town?
That's a very good question. In the 80s and 90s, I saw celebrities mostly at the grocery store. Mostly at that is a beautiful, wonderful store called Gelson's, Gelsons. There's a few Gelsons in LA, and Gelson's has the best produce, the best salad bar, the best cuts of meat and vegetables. And when I was making better money than I'm making right now, I used to shop at Gelson's. So for years and years, you'd see Clint Eastwood, you'd see Belinda Carlisle from the Go Go's. I saw Ray Manzarek from The Doors. I saw cast members from The Simpsons. I saw Buddy Rich walking around. So over to your point, 80s, 90s, I would say at Gelson's, at the various Gelson's, I would see famous people almost all the time. I would say since COVID, I think they send their people out now. I kept running into Jay Leno recently at a Vons in West Hollywood. And I was Jay Leno's publicist in the 80s. So every time I see him, he and I laugh because, I hadn't seen him in a guy in 30 years. And now I saw him like 3 weeks in a row at the grocery store. But by and large, I would say since COVID, probably, I think celebrities are a little less attuned to going out in public, and I think perhaps they send their people out to go shopping for them. And certainly, with Uber Eats or these different driving apps, my daughter just told me the other day. I didn't know this. You can get groceries. You can go to one of these things and say, I need a toothbrush, I need a can of soup, and I need a rye bread, and they'll come to you with groceries. So I think it's much less now than it was, for sure.
Yeah, all of those things I'm sure as a celebrity would be helpful. I use that a few times for groceries.
Yeah,
When my mom found out what I was paying people, she still lives in the same town. She's like, "I'll do your groceries for you." So actually, I get them done for me now for cheaper than that.
I know. It's sort of an
Uh,
embarrassment. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a poor man. I make a decent living, and a couple of times, like if I have friends over and I need some coffee and cake, I'll do that. And then the poor driver, the poor driver is driving like an old beat up car, and he's delivering cake and ice cream to me, and I'm in Beverly Hills. I feel bad. It's like I feel guilty, but these people seem to be very grateful. It's an honest job. I'll tell a lot of foreigners, man. I don't know if it's everywhere, but in LA, most of the Uber drivers are foreign people, and they don't seem to mind working in LA. They are happy to be here. It's a lovely place. The weather's nice. The people are nice. Other than a smoggy day or an earthquake day, or when OJ is out killing people, by and large, I've been here 44 years. I've seen everything. By and large, living in LA is really quite nice, I would say.
yeah, I know it's got its issues, but as a person that's visited there and wrestled there before, I really love it. But of course, I'm just a visitor. I have to ask you though, before we get on to the real topics,
Sure,
how
whatever you
is
want.
crime in Beverly Hills? We always hear about the crime in LA, and obviously places like Compton, which we hear to us is like infested with crime to Canadian. How is like Beverly Hills compared to Los Angeles, compared to a place like Compton?
Well, 2 days ago, Sunday, 2 days ago, Sunday, I live in a very heavily Jewish neighborhood where I live in Beverly Hills. It's on the cusp it's called Pico Robertson. It's a very, very heavily Orthodox Jewish. I'm Jewish, but I'm not practicing or observing. But these are Orthodox Jews that live right near me. So Sunday, Devin, there were pro-Palestinian protesters at a temple, 5 blocks from my building. And man, all day, police sirens and cop cars and helicopters. My daughter tried to come visit me. She couldn't get to my street. My street was blocked off. I didn't even know that. There was a big ruckus. It was in the LA Times. It was on the TV news. This is within 5 blocks of my house. Now, so, political, I would say since Trump came along, there are pro-Trump rallies in Beverly Hills that tend to get violent. Now there's these pro-Palestinian, and it got violent the other day. They threw bricks through people's cars. Um, so I would say political violence in Beverly Hills definitely on the rise. The other thing that's kind of sad throughout LA, but also in Beverly Hills, believe it or not, homeless. Devin, when I go out, man, every day I see at least one, two, or three homeless people every day in Beverly Hills. Now you think, wow, boy, and I give them some money if they're in my path. I'm going to a drugstore. I'll give them $5 or something. But you think about it, there are homeless people in Beverly Hills. It's the homeless problem in LA is really, really sad. There are parts of LA that are just tent cities under various overpasses for the freeways, just tents, many tents, and they don't smell very good. And you don't want to you don't want to have a flat tire or run out of gas when you're near them, because some of these people are drug addicts and they can be violent. So I would say political protests in Beverly Hills definitely bad, and the homeless population is definitely has a presence here too.
Yeah, we see the tent cities a lot on the news here in Canada about LA, and we're hearing mostly bad these days, but obviously traffic is bad too. I have experienced the traffic there.
Boy, tell me about it, man. There are days. I'll give you an example. Let me tell you exactly what happened in March, a few months ago in March. I think we talked about this last time. I created the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. You and I spoke about that last time. That's a group that brings together Hollywood producers, writers, and directors with UFO researchers, experiencers, and disclosure advocates. So we have about 200 members. In fact, Devin, I'd love to put you in there. You should be a member. So we have about 200 members now. In March, I did a live event at a theater in Sherman Oaks, which normally would be 45 minutes from my house. And the event was called The Making of Project Blue Book, the TV series. Now, you may have seen it. It was a really good show. It was on the History Channel a few years ago. I had Paul Hynek and his brother Joel Hynek on, along with the producers and writers of that show. The Hynek brothers, their father was Dr. J. Allen Hynek, and he was the head of Project Blue Book for the U.S. Air Force, and he was the consultant to Spielberg for Close Encounters. So anyway, we had this wonderful event. Now I'm producing the event. I'm hosting the event, okay? So I wake up super early at 7 that morning. I get dressed. I have some breakfast. I'm all raring to go. Get in my car. It was the day of the LA Marathon. I didn't know that. What would normally take me 45 minutes from my house to the theater, it took me 3.5 hours to get to my event. I almost missed my event that I had been planning for months and months. And boy, I considered crying a few times. It was total gridlock in Los Angeles. You could not drive your car. Even the back alleys and the secret little paths that I'm aware of, everything, man, was cars because of the LA Marathon. So I learned never ever do a PR event in LA the day of the LA Marathon. I learned my lesson.
And you mentioned you were Jay Leno's publicist. I'm sure the fans want to know, do you have any stories about Jay Leno you could share with us?
Overall, he is as nice a person in real life as he appears to be. I hung out with him a number of times backstage at the Tonight Show. The funny story, Devin, is once I was back there, it was me and my boss and him and his manager in his dressing room. Jay is literally in his underwear. Okay, he's wearing his boxer shorts and nothing else. And I knock on his dressing room door, and he goes, "Hey, Dan, yeah, come on in. Yeah, everything's fine." I go, "Really, Jay? You're in your underwear." No, it's fine. Yeah, come on in. Yeah, it's fine. Everything cool. And we came in. We had a nice talk. Couldn't be nicer. So I guess my funniest story, really, that only happened once. But I'm with Jay Leno, and he's in his underwear at the Tonight Show. And it just shows what a authentic, normal, regular guy he was. And I saw him again last year at Vaughn's, and just as nice to me. Couldn't have been nicer. He seemed now he, of course, he's got to be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. When I represented him, he had just gotten the Tonight Show. So now he's a legend. He's got to be unbelievably wealthy. Same guy. Same night. Hey, Dan, how you doing? Nice to see you. Yeah, is that your daughter? Yeah, okay. Yeah, we seeing you. Nice guy. So big picture of Jay Leno, nice guy, just like he appears to be. No airs about him. I knew Jerry Seinfeld before he was famous, and I met Jerry Seinfeld again after he was famous. Jerry changed a lot. Jerry became very jaded. Oh yeah, I remember you, like you peon, So, and they're best friends. So Jay stayed exactly the same. Jerry really got affected big time.
Yeah, I've noticed that from people I know in wrestling too that made it. Some of them change a lot after they get famous. But let's talk about your books here, and I'll put up the website for fans that
Great, thank you.
want to check out your website.
That's
Let's
great.
look at the first two. You have numerous books out.
I do.
These are the
So
two.
these are the two. These just came out. So I have 5 books. I have written and published 5 books in the last 2 years. My joke is, Devin, I don't think even Stephen King pulled that one off. And none of them are self-published. They're all published by real companies. So I got really, really lucky. I've been a Hollywood publicist for 40 plus years. I've worked with a lot of celebrities. 2 years ago, my first book came out called Flirting with Fame. It's on the big green poster back there behind my head. And that came out 2 years ago, Flirting with Fame. And those are my Hollywood stories. I worked with Bruce Springsteen when I was in high school. He wasn't famous. I knew Jerry Seinfeld before he was famous. I went to college with Howard Stern. I knew Brooke Shields before she was famous. I've just been in and around the entertainment industry since the age of 15. And so that's that book. And that book did very well. I got a lot of really great press on that book. Then my second book, it was actually a sex book. I don't talk about it because no one wants me to talk about it. But the second book is called Carrots, True Confessions of a Hollywood Sex Addict. And I'm not ashamed of it, but that was my second book. After I got divorced, I was a sex addict for 20 years. Um, I'm not proud of it. I'm not ashamed of it. I embraced it, and I wrote about the struggles I had with sex addiction. So that was my second book. My third book is called After They Came. That came out last year. That's the book that put me on the map
Is
within
that
you
the
follow.
sex addict follow up?
After They Came, well, you're not the first person that's made that joke. I know it sounds like a sex, right? Doesn't it sound like that? No, that's a UFO book. Benevolent aliens come to Earth, save mankind. And that's the book. Through that book is how I met Steve Bassett and Nick Pope and Richard Dolan, Ron Janix, the owner of Contact in the Desert, Whitley Strieber, Travis Walton, Katie Page. All these people now are my friends. Earl Grey Anderson, the head of MUFON Southern California, Ron James from MUFON. So because of After They Came, my third book, put me into the fast lane of ufology. And within 1 year of nobody knowing me, no one knew me a year ago. And now everyone knows me because the book came out. I promoted the hell out of it. I've been on George Norrie's show twice. And then I created the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance with Stephen Bassett. And because of that, because Stephen's been around, as you know, for 30 years, and he introduced me to Dolan and Pope and everybody. And now I know everybody. And it's really quite my daughter goes, Dad, all these things just seem to have lined up for you. And Devin, it's only been a year. That book came out a year ago. That's all it is. Nobody knew me. Last Contact in the Desert. Not one person there knew me. Not one. This Contact 3 weeks ago, everyone knew me. People are coming up. Dan, I read your book. Dan, I heard you on George Norrie. Dan, I heard you with Dave Foley. Great interview. How do I get your book? Women are hugging me. Devin, it's like, wow.
I was just going to ask you, since you mentioned you were a sex addict, are there UFO groupies for like, because wrestling has them, rock and roll has them, celebrities has them. For the guys, like, I mean, Luis Elizondo has like a family and everything. But for these people that are now famous in UFOs, is there like a groupie following?
You're the first person that I have ever heard on the planet Earth ask that question. From what? Okay, so I am not George Clooney. I am not a good-looking man. The women that tend to like me, Devin, are not the most attractive women in the world. The pretty ones in ufology are married. For example, Katie Page, gorgeous blonde, one of my favorite people. I love her. I always flirt with her. She was there actually with her fiance, this like the best looking guy I ever saw in my life. And then Tracy Dolan is married to Richard Dolan. Beautiful, gorgeous woman. She's beautiful. But the me's and the Steve Bassett's, Nick Pope is married. I don't see groupies. I'll tell you this though. I first met Giorgio Tsoukalos in 2007 before he was famous. And I met him many times over the last 20 years. And every time Devin and I saw Giorgio, he was with a different girl. And each of his girlfriends was very pretty. So if anyone's getting groupies from ufology, I'm telling you right now, it's Giorgio from Ancient Aliens.
Very interesting. And you mentioned Whitley Strieber, who was at the last Contact in the Desert.
Yes.
I've been following him for a while now, and one interesting thing that I came across in one of his interviews last week, and I had never heard of this phenomenon, but I'm sure you're aware of it. He brought up that when he was allegedly being visited by ETs,
Whatever.
which he says he still is to this day, he hears this sky horn or sky trumpet sound before. And he said, for people that aren't familiar with it, just search it on the internet. There's videos all over the world with this mysterious sky horn sound. And I
Hmm.
did. And there is. And in some of these videos, there actually is some UFO craft in some of them. But in other ones, it's just people panicked, wondering what the hell these are. What do you know about these sky trumpets?
That's the first I've heard of that one. I don't know anything about that. But in regard to Whitley Strieber, I met him in February at Conscious Life Expo. That's a big expo out here in LA every year at LAX Hilton. I met him there. He was on a panel with Stephen Bassett. And later that day, Devin, he gave a 90-minute talk about the ETs that he's had relationships with since he got abducted and wrote the famous book, Communion. Devin, I swear to God, this guy showed, I think, 4 very short film clips of aliens in different people's bedrooms that he's gotten from around the world. And he said, I'm not bullshitting you guys. These are real aliens. These are the aliens that I have been abducted by. I'm telling you, these are real. And these were not like Hollywood aliens. These were just so unusually creepy looking and authentic looking. I had chills. I remember I had like at the back of my spine. I was like, oh my God, those really look like perhaps what real aliens, like 4-foot beings. So I don't know about the Skyhorns, but Whitley Strieber has film footage of real aliens, and I saw it, and I was amazed, man. I was blown away. And then I hung out with him a little bit at Contact. Nice guy. He's a little protective of himself. I know I've reached out to him on your behalf. I don't think he ever wrote back. He's very
I'll
guarded.
I'll get him one of these days.
Yeah, Devin, he's very guarded, man. From
Yeah,
because he is famous. He has real stories. His new book is called Them. Did you read that one? Them.
yeah, I got that in an audiobook.
How was
Yeah.
that? I've been meaning to get that one. Is
It's
that good?
it's it's good. The funny thing is, I actually like falling asleep to it and having nightmares to it. For some reason, I actually, even though they scare the hell out of me, I enjoy them. I'm actually used to it now, and I'm kind of disappointed if I do that and don't get a nightmare.
Wow.
I don't know if there's any meaning to all these. I have alien nightmares all the time now. I don't know if there's any meaning to them or if it's just because I'm constantly
In this,
immersed in this subject. Do you have a lot of like abduction style nightmares?
no, no. I dream, and we can talk about this because it's part of my book, My Paranormal Life. I dream about my late father quite often. Okay, so one of the reasons I wrote my new book, My Paranormal Life, just came out the other day. My dad was an electronics engineer for the Army I think I talked about this with you last time. He worked for the Army for 45 years. After he passed, I found out my father helped to invent military drones. And I did further investigation into my dad after he died. And I have some pretty good proof that he worked on reverse engineering of retrieved UFOs for the Army. I have pretty good data for that. In fact, at Contact, I did a 90-minute lecture called Why I Believe My Father Worked on UFOs for the U.S. Military. And I had about 400 people in the room. And it was really good. It was the best thing I ever did. I cried at the end because I show a picture of my dad and me at the end. Last time I ever saw him alive, and I started crying. And I was not expecting. I don't know. You're a public figure. I don't know if you've ever been performing in front of people and you start crying, but I did. And it's not easy to stop because that's how much I love my father. Anyway, after my dad died, a couple of nights later, he died on a Monday morning. 4 nights later, Friday, I'm in Silicon Valley for a client at a meeting in Silicon Valley for a client. And then they put me up in a hotel. So I'm fast asleep. It's 3 a.m. I'm in a hotel in Silicon Valley. Middle of the night, I hear from underneath my bed, my box spring and my mattress in the hotel, Devin, it started moving. It started shaking back and forth, vibrating. And I thought we were having an earthquake. I really did. I thought it was an earthquake. And then I hear, Danny, Jeannie changed my will. I sat up in bed. I'm like, Dad? I turn on the light. This is 3 a.m. I go, Dad? This is 4 days after my father died. Danny, Jeannie changed my will. Now, Jeannie was his second wife. Her name was Jean. My father's the only person on the planet that called her Jeannie. That's number one. Number two, my dad had severe Alzheimer's the last 2 years of his life. After my father died, he contacted me that day in a hotel 4 days after he died. It was a disembodied voice. I looked under the bed. I thought maybe my dad's ghost was under the bed. Nobody was there. My brothers and I hired a lawyer. That lawyer contacted my father's wife's lawyer. And long story short, while my dad had Alzheimer's, she changed his will and she changed his insurance policies. And my brothers and I did not get what we were entitled to. And that's a whole other story. But the point is, my dad told me that from the other side, literally as a voice. He told me that from the other side. A week after that, I'm back home. I'm in my house here in Beverly Hills. I'm sleeping 3 in the morning. I have a touch lamp on top of my dresser. It only goes on and off if you touch it with a human hand. Middle of the night, this lamp is going on and off and on and off, and there's no one there. It's going on and off. I sat up, I go, Dad? And then it stopped. And then a week later, I play the drums. I've been playing the drums my whole entire life. I have a little toy drum set. You can see it way back behind me. My dad gave me a little toy drum set about 20 years ago as a little gift, as a toy. I had that on my dresser in my bedroom. Middle of the night, 3 in the morning, I hear the drums and the cymbals are being played, like with fingertips. Someone is playing that little drum set. Oh, I knew it was my dad. I knew it was my dad because it was. So my heart's racing. I'm shaking. I go, Dad, is that you? And I sort of saw like a mist. I think I saw like a mist kind of thing. And I said, Dad, I love you, man, but please leave. You're scaring the shit out of me, Dad. Please leave. And he did. And I regret that, David, man, because he didn't come back after that.
Very interesting. What are your theories on the other side? You've mentioned a few times in this you're Jewish, but I'm always curious for opinions. You've written a book on the paranormal life,
Well,
your paranormal
my
life.
paranormal life, yeah. So I have, during COVID, I just was very prolific. That's how I wrote all 5 books during COVID. My paranormal life, I was thinking, all right, so I told you the dad stuff. I can tell you 2 more really good ghost stories I could tell you. I had a very dear friend in college, Boston University, and she was my best female friend, not a girlfriend, best female friend. We were really tight for 4 years in college. We remained friends. I moved to LA. She got married and moved to Connecticut. But we were really good friends for 20 years. We talked all the time. We wrote letters all the time. 1999, she calls me up. She says, Hi, Danny. I go, Julie, hi, nice to hear from you. How are you? She goes, Not good. I said, What's wrong? She goes, I have stage 4 ovarian cancer. I don't have much longer to live. I said, What did you just say? This is like one of my best friends on the planet. She goes, Yeah, I don't have much longer to live. I go, Oh my God. So I said, I'll be there. That was a Tuesday. I was at her house that Saturday in Connecticut. Spent the day with her and her husband and her son. She looked like an Auschwitz survivor. She looked awful. She was hooked up to an IV drip machine. She looked terrible. I knew I'd never see her again. But I spent the day with her. I came all the way from LA just to be with her for that one day, and then I flew all the way back. About a week later, her husband called me. This is 1999. Her husband called me. He goes, Danny, Julie passed. You'll never know how much your visit to her meant to her. It helped her. It helped ease her so she could pass. And I said, Dennis, man, I'm so sorry to hear this. So I left my office. I walked around my neighborhood crying. I came back to my house. I was living in Encino at this time. Came back to my house. I took a nap on the couch because I was sad. I'm on the couch and I'm dreaming. In the dream, incredibly vivid dream, there's a male angel sitting in my backyard at the picnic table, head to toe, white angel with big white wings. And he looked like he was waiting for something. This is in the dream. I see an angel in the backyard, in my real backyard. Then in the dream, Julie, who had just died a few hours earlier, is standing right next to me at my head. I'm laying on the couch. She's fully dressed, healthy, happy, normal Julie, smiling. She goes, Danny, I'm fine. Please don't worry about me. Everything's fine. It's very nice here. I have to go now. And then she vanished. Now I sat up, panting and shaking. And Devin, I'm telling you, she visited me on her way to heaven. She did, because she did. It was a dream that I know she was communicating with me through that. That absolutely happened. And the angel guy, the guy in the background, was like her escort, I guess, into heaven. So that happened. I have a great poltergeist story, if you'd like to hear that one.
Yes, and what are poltergeists in your opinion? Are those the more sometimes they're mischievous, but I understand some of them are actually allegedly demonic.
Poltergeist means, I believe it's German. It means loud ghost. Loud ghost. All right. So here's a story. I'll give you the highlights of this one. And there's a chapter in my book, My Paranormal Life. There's a chapter called My Grandfather the Poltergeist. Okay. So in 2003, I moved into Beverly Hills in an apartment with a brand new girlfriend. We moved in together. And the day she moved in a few days before I did. The day she moved in, she's setting stuff up in the apartment. There are three moving men outside at the truck on the street. She's inside the house alone, and she hears, "Joe," like that. "Joe?" She looked around. There's no one in our house. No one was inside the house. So she thought that was weird. She told me that night. I'm like, oh, okay, that's fine. Then a couple nights later, we're watching TV, and something plopped over in the dining room. We had a bag of like groceries in the dining room. It had been there for days. It was one of those kitchen sink dish drain plastic things. It had been in a bag for days, sitting there. Somehow it had popped out of the bag and flown across the room onto the floor for no apparent reason. So I go in there. I'm like, how the hell did that happen? Okay, that's number two. Now the story gets better. A couple nights after that, we're asleep. We hear in the middle of the night, crash, really, really loud. We go in the master bathroom, a huge drinking glass of water. It looked as though someone had lifted it and smashed it onto the bathroom tile floor as hard as you possibly can. The whole glass was in little shards. We go, how the hell did that happen? Because it was way in the back on the shelf. It was back by the toothbrushes. It wasn't near the edge. But that was really weird. Okay. My kids were 12 and 14 at this time. They used to come visit me. I was divorced. So I had a room for each of my kids, of course, when they came to visit. So weekend comes, my kids are there, middle of the night, my son screaming, "Dad, there's something in my room. There's something in my room." I fell fast asleep. I flew out of bed, flew into my son's room. He's shaking. And then he said, "Dad, someone's in my room knocking on my walls and the doors and even the glass of the TV screen, and all like in 360. Someone's knocking in my room all the way around my room." He goes, "I know there's someone here." And he was not kidding. And this was not a dream because my son was not a liar. I was like, wow, what the hell is that? So I'm like, "Jordan, you know what? Let's leave the light on, go back to sleep. We'll leave the lights on. Everything will be fine." Okay. The next morning, me, my daughter, my girlfriend were in the kitchen making breakfast. My son's in his room. His bedroom door slams, bang, hard, really, really hard. And he goes, "Dad, someone just slammed my door." Because he was in bed. Someone slammed his door. There was no wind. There was no air conditioning. So we ran down. I tried to open the door, Devin, and it was like someone was holding it like on the other side. It was like hard to open, like, come on, my son's in there. Let me, and then I got in there. Okay. At this point, I said, okay, something's clearly wrong in this house. I left out the best one. During this era, we had a beautiful fireplace at this apartment. I bought a brand new canister of those long matchsticks. Those long matchsticks that come in a canister for a fireplace. They're like decorative, right? So there's a canister. I'm standing next to the fireplace in the living room. My girlfriend's making dinner. And I open the canister. I like a schmuck, I grabbed the matches, and a normal person would pull out like one or two, right? I pulled out all 50. I grabbed them, and I pulled them out of the canister so fast that when they lit. So now I'm holding a torch of 50 matches, 50 in my hand, and there's a flame in front of my face, inches in front, and I'm staring at it like, what the F? What the F did I just do? With that, and I'm telling you the truth, I look at the side, my left side of my peripheral vision. There's a whitish bluish mist, white blue mist is flying from the dining room, flying like Casper the Friendly Ghost without a face, from the dining room, flying through the living room. This thing grabbed this torch out of my hand and it threw this torch into the fireplace. And I watched that happen. I watched it happen. I did not throw that into the fireplace. I was frozen. And I'm like, wow, whatever that was just saved my life. It saved my face. My face would have gone up in flames, like Richard Pryor. Okay, now we go to my son, and the door slammed, and I said, okay, we have to figure out what's happening. We had a Ouija board, and I do not recommend a Ouija board unless you're very brave. Although you like to be scared, maybe, Devin, maybe you should get one. We took out a Ouija board.
Yeah, I've had bad experiences too, and I wonder if some let some negative energy into my life, so I might stay away from them for a while.
I suggest stay away. So right after my son's door slammed, it was me, my girlfriend, my son, my daughter, the four of us. We laid out the Ouija board, that thing that moves around. It's called a planchette. So each of us had the hands on the planchette. And I said, is there a ghost in this house? And the thing went, yes, right away. Yes. Okay. What's your name? And this thing wrote Joseph. Okay. Joseph. Okay. Devin, it gets better. Where are you from? Syria. Now, when it wrote Syria, I said, are you my grandpa Joe? Yes. My father's father, Joe, was from Syria. Now, is that amazing? Is that not amazing? My grandfather, who died when I was 11, this is in 2003. He died in 1967. He's in my house. I go, why are you here? And it wrote, to teach. And then I said, to teach, what do you want it to teach? What do you want to teach? And it wrote, Jordan, Jordan. That's my son's name. He's right there, Jordan. Then I said, what do you want to teach Jordan? And then, Devin, it wrote a Hebrew. Now, my grandfather was a Orthodox cantor, Jewish Orthodox cantor. He spoke Hebrew. This planchette wrote out a Hebrew phrase. I wrote it down because I couldn't translate it. I called my dentist, who was an Orthodox Jew. I said, what do these words mean? And he told me over the phone, he goes, it means I am a stranger here. So my dead grandfather, the poltergeist, I am a stranger here. So then I went back to the game. I said, Grandpa Joe, and I'm crying because I loved this guy. I said, I love you. Please leave my family. You're scaring us. It's not cool that you're here. I need you to please, respectfully, I need you to please leave. It went yes, Devin. The thing went yes. And then that was it. Didn't move again. We asked more questions. Nothing happened. So I know people and things. I know things exist on the other side. I've experienced it with my father, my friend Julie, and my grandfather. So clearly, I know there's things on the other side. I'm not an expert. I never asked for any of these things to happen. But when you experience them, you realize, boy, there's a lot more to being a human being than we're aware of in everyday life.
Yeah, and when you research it, I know there's some people that aren't credible on there, but there is some credible people, so people should just do their own research and come to their own conclusions.
Yeah,
But it seems like science is opening up more to the spiritual world than it was in the past. The door was more closed in the past.
I think so. Do you know who Dr. Hans Holzer was? Do you know that name?
I've heard the name, but nothing's coming to me.
I could. All right, so I'm going to hook you up because you're my friend. Dr. Hans Holzer was the world's first famous ghost hunter. He lived in New York City. I think he wrote 105 books. This guy was the inspiration for Danny Aykroyd to write the movie Ghostbusters. Okay, this was the world's first ghost hunter in the 70s. He was investigating ghosts with audio tape things and mediums, and he was doing like sessions and going to visit haunted houses and talking to spirits. This is the first guy who really became very famous and put ghost hunting on the map. When he died, it was like a half-page article in the New York Times. Okay. His daughter, Alexandra Holzer, lives in New York State. She's a friend of mine. I'm going to have her on my podcast for my Halloween show. She is a a medium and a psych, like a ghost. She's like she's like a ghost whisperer. People call her to go to haunted venues, homes, and hospitals and buildings, and she goes and who are you? What were your names? And she is able to. She inherited this from her father. Her father taught her how to do this. So if you want the ghost person, she is, in my opinion, she is the ghost expert in America. I could do an email, and she's a lovely woman. She's married. I think she has 5 kids or something. But she knows all things about ghosts. She wrote a book about people having sex with ghosts. Can you imagine that one? Imagine you're sleeping. You're
That's
sleeping.
one of the things that's hard to believe, to be honest with you.
That's pretty hard to believe, right? You're sleeping, and you're hopefully I mean, in my case, I mean, if it was Raquel Welch, okay, that wouldn't be
Is
an
that
issue.
her? She's
That's her.
pretty good looking herself.
She's
So
very
maybe if
straight.
I was a ghost, I'd be doing that too.
I don't know that people have had sex with her, but I believe she has studied the phenomenon. And that Dr. Hans is on her left. That was her father. People claim to have. I don't know how you have sex when I could barely have sex when I'm awake. At this point, I'm not doing real well.
Yeah.
But that's just a joke.
Is that the real cause of wet dreams?
Yeah, right. Maybe that would be a good scientific study, right? Wet dreams, biological or ghostly? Question mark, right? God, that's funny.
What I would like, if you could ever fly, someone that actually knows haunted places and investigates them, somewhere where I could actually go and actually have a good chance of having a ghost
Well, I'm going to email
experience
you
would be
and her
fun.
to connect you. You should interview her, even if it's offline.
Yeah.
She is very much plugged into the ghost world. She's had TV shows on. A few years ago, there was a show on. It ran for I think 2 years called the Hans Holzer Files. She opened up her. She's the caretaker of her father's estate, so she opened up her father, and her father had extensive handwritten notes, home movies, and audio tapes of every case. And he investigated hundreds and hundreds of cases all over the United States. She is she's like the queen bee. If I if I need ghost advice, man, I go to Alexandra Holzer. She tells me what to do.
Yeah, I'm just looking at this picture of Hans in front of a
Yeah,
house, the
yeah,
Amityville house.
that is the Amityville house. He was one of the people that investigated after the fact. It turns out that, in fact,
Wasn't
in
it for
no
sale recently?
maybe in November, this coming November, it's the 50th anniversary of the murders that happened in that house. Okay, now I have a good friend named Ryan Katzenbach. Ryan Katzenbach did a documentary a few years ago called Shattered Hopes, the true story of the Amityville horror murders. And that's really what happened. And he's writing a book, which I got him a publishing deal for. And his book is coming out in November for the 50th anniversary of Amityville. I could try to get him on for you as he has been studying Amityville since he's like a kid. He was fascinated by it. Basically, there was a guy named Butch DeFeo. He was the screw up 22-year-old screw up son of a very abusive man and a woman who looked the other way when the father was beating this kid up. And one day, this kid had enough. He got a shotgun and he killed his entire family. They were all sleeping. He killed them all. What happened was he went to jail. He died a few years ago. And then the next people that bought the house after that family moved out, they came up with, this would be a great idea. Let's create a haunted house. So, Devin, the Amityville house was never haunted. It was the people that owned it after the family was murdered. They created that as a book, then that movie, and they made millions and millions of dollars. But my friend Ryan knows all the real things. It was a horrendous murder of one guy. He killed his whole family because the father was abusing him. Like the Menendez brothers out here in Beverly Hills, they killed their parents.
Yeah.
If you
Apparently, it was selling for only 850,000. which is crazy.
Well,
That's like a townhouse here where I live. The real estate prices are so bad.
yeah, but really, would you want to live where five people were, bleeding to death?
Yes, I
Yeah,
for some
you
weird
would.
reason I would.
You would.
For
You
some
would.
weird reason I would.
I think
I
you're the
don't know
only
why
person
I
I've
would.
you're the person I ever met who looks forward to having weird dreams and scary dreams. I hate scary dreams. I want to sleep and be peaceful. I don't like to be scared of my sleep.
Yeah, I would actually like to live in a haunted house, as weird as that sounds. But your other book, which we haven't brought up, which I should bring up, is actually a fiction book,
Yes,
this five book. And what made you, and it's about murders, right? It's about a
it is.
serial killer.
It
What
is.
made you want to get into the fiction side of things?
Okay, so after I wrote my paranormal life, I was like, okay, so I wrote Flirting with Fame, my Hollywood book. I wrote Carrots, Confessions of a Sex Addict. That's my sex book. I wrote After They Came. That's my UFO book. I wrote my Paranormal Life. That's my ghost book. Then I'm thinking, I've written 4 books. That's pretty good, man. I was pretty happy with myself. I walk 5 miles, Devin, every other day. I walk 5 miles every other day through my neighborhood here in Beverly Hills into West Hollywood and back. So when I walk, I have my headphones on with my music, and I'm thinking five. I'm walking 5 miles, 5 miles, five, and then I'm like, if I wrote one more book, that would be my 5th book. So like five. So the number five just could flash into my head. Five, five, five. Okay, now what is five? That's really a great title. I love the title. I looked it up. There's no other books that are just called five. So I'm like, okay, what is five? Then I thought the craziest idea. I thought, what if someone like Bruce Springsteen or Bono or Mick Jagger, what if like the biggest rock star in the world, after they do a concert and all that fame and glory and love, they get in their car and then they sneak around in the dark by themselves and they're a serial killer. Think if Bruce Springsteen was a serial murderer and nobody knew it, would that not be the greatest premise? So that craziness came to my head. Then I was thinking, I love five. What could five be? Five needs to be someone's name. It needs to be someone's name. I came up with Feival, Feival. Feival is a Eastern European name from the 1870s. So now I have the title, I have someone named Feival, and I have Bruce Springsteen killing women as a serial killer. I'm like, what if I had a guy, and here's the premise. What if I had a guy named Feival in 1870s Europe who was a serial killer, and because he's famous, I made him an actor, a famous actor. He's a famous actor in Europe in 1870s. He kills women on the side. He gets discovered. He gets murdered and he dies. And then 100 years later, he's reincarnated as a kid named Billy Simon. Billy Simon is this guitar singer songwriter prodigy in 1970s Boston. He's good looking. In my mind, he's James Taylor meets Bruce Springsteen, I guess. He's good looking. He's gifted. He plays guitar. He has beautiful voice. He writes beautiful songs. So 100 years later, this kid becomes famous and he becomes the biggest pop star in the world. But when he was little, the reincarnation of the original murderer, Feival, went into his body. So he then becomes a serial killer as well. And you have to read the book to see the machinations of how I made those things happen. But I told George Norrie the other night about five. He goes, Danny, five, that sounds like a book. And I go, yeah, George, you wanna help me produce it? I need help. So I'm hoping five becomes a movie. No, he said it sounds like a movie. That's what he said. It sounds like a movie. So I'm hoping five could be a movie. It's like a Stephen King short story. It's a novella because it's only 115 pages. It's short. And after they came my UFO book, at the moment I have a screenwriter in New York writing the screenplay for that. I have 10 Hollywood producers who have become friends of mine who I want to hand them that screenplay. So I'd like, after they came, to become a movie. I think five would be a great 1 hour scary TV show or something. Devin, I don't know how old you are. Do you remember Rod Serling had a show called Night Gallery? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I'm 41, but I've that was before my time, but I've heard of it.
Okay, you've heard of the Twilight Zone.
Everybody's heard of
Okay,
that and knows the
okay,
sound.
right. So Rod Serling created the Twilight Zone in the early 60s. Okay, we all know that one. In the 70s, and Twilight Zone was were all in black and white. In the 70s, early 70s, I was in high school. Rod Serling's next show was called Night Gallery. And you know who directed the very first Night Gallery ever? A
No idea.
19-year-old Steven Spielberg.
Interesting. I used to, you probably didn't watch these. I think they may have been filmed in Toronto. Alfred Hitchcock Presents in like the late 80s had short scary shows too
I
for a couple
remember
seasons.
I remember the originals.
Yeah, yeah,
I just turned 68. So when I was a little kid, I was a little kid from 56 to 66, maybe till 70. I watched the original Twilight Zone. I watched Alfred Hitchcock. Do you remember a show called The Outer Limits? That was another good show in my
yeah.
era.
I didn't watch it, but
They were all related.
wasn't there a 90s version too?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All the even Alfred Hitchcock, all of them,
Yeah,
sort of all of those really good things. Everything comes back eventually, but
yeah.
well, I don't know what I was
I
going to
got to
say.
ask you about Spielberg. Supposedly, he's going to do another big budget UFO movie, and there's rumors that the movie might actually be an extraterrestrial explanation movie, more based on alleged fact than fiction and presented by Spielberg. Have you heard anything about this?
I know he's doing a new one. I know that all right, so he has been on the inside track, and you could talk to Steve Bassett. He knows this for sure. Stephen has been on the inside track of the reality since he befriended Dr. J. Allen Hynek in the 70s. J. Allen Hynek created the terms close encounters of the first, second, and third kind. So he was a scientist. But Stephen, as a personal, I met him once, very nice guy. I met him for a few minutes 10 years ago. But he's had the inside track. Do you know this story? When he went to the White House, my theme here is that Stephen has known about aliens for a long time. Stephen went to the White House in the 80s. President Reagan was the president. Spielberg showed the movie E.T. at the White House to 50 people and the president and Mrs. Reagan. At the end of that movie, Reagan gets in front of the room and says, "There's maybe 3 people in this room right now who know that what we just saw on that screen is 100% real." And Spielberg said he wasn't laughing, he wasn't joking, he wasn't winking, he was dead serious. So Spielberg has been, because he's Spielberg, the guy's a unicorn, man. He's one of a kind. He's been on the inside track. So if he's going to do the big disclosure movie, he's the guy to do it. A lot of people have been waiting for him. I always thought he should do the real story of Roswell, because Roswell was a real crash that really happened, and there were 3 dead bodies and 1 living body, and there's countless pieces of evidence and proof, deathbed confessions. Roswell really happened, and you would think, wouldn't Spielberg do the real story of Roswell? Wouldn't he have been the one to have done that? So I always wondered why he didn't. But I can't wait to see his whatever this movie is. It could be the disclosure movie, And
Yeah,
on this,
I've even heard he's been working with Tom DeLonge, who has been to the stars has been saying for years they're going to get in the movie business. So maybe it could be their narrative of disclosure.
well, that's certainly, listen, I created the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance a year ago. Tom DeLonge did Academy to the Stars, whatever year that was. He was ahead of the curve. But that flamed out pretty quickly. The founding partners sort of dissipated and went their own ways. But if Stephen is going to show evidence or proof, or God, I mean, if he shows real footage of aliens or bodies or ship, if he does that, man, that's disclosure. Then we don't need it to be. Stephen Bassett wants it to be from the president, right? The president has to go on TV, whoever it is, Trump or Biden, whoever the next one is, and people, we've known about something for 80 years. We couldn't tell you for national security. The time has come. They're real. They're here. They've been here a long time. We felt the time was now to tell you. We'll unveil more information as we're able to. To Bassett, it's got to be the president. But you just said something brilliant. I mean, if it's Spielberg, well, I think Spielberg's more powerful than probably any U.S. president, right? He's going to have more reach, more millions. Everyone around the world is going to see that movie. Everyone's going to see that movie.
Yeah,
So
and speaking of presidents, I find it very interesting. This has come up on Logan Paul's interview with
I
Donald
heard,
Trump, and there was an interview that came out today. Trump is really saying he's interested in UFOs. We've seen Biden show no interest in this at
right,
all. I'm not talking anything else political other
right,
than
right, right.
Trump seems to be going for the UFO people's votes as if there's something out there, he wants to be the disclosure president, it seems.
Stephen Bassett called me this morning. We talked for an hour, and he said, "Dan, did you hear about Trump on Logan Paul?" I didn't even know who Logan Paul was. And he said, "Dan, God forbid Trump is going to become the disclosure president." He goes, "Dan, I need to take 25 Xanax and take a nap." He wasn't happy about it. But Trump apparently might. It's not that Biden doesn't know. I think every president knows to a limited degree. Some presidents knew much, much more than others. FDR knew about extraterrestrials. There are memos before World War II, even. FDR knew. Truman absolutely knew, because Roswell was during the Truman administration. Truman created the Majestic 12 group. You know this. They evolved into what people think is today's black government. Eisenhower knew. There's leaked documents called the presidential the briefing document for President-elect Eisenhower. So Eisenhower knew. Kennedy, I believe Kennedy knew. Kennedy was very good friends with James Forrestal. James Forrestal was one of the Majestic 12. James Forrestal, of the 12 men of Majestic 12, he was the one who said, "Hey, why don't we do disclosure? Let's tell people that aliens are real. What do we have to lose?" And all these, these generals and these scientists and Truman, no, 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 no. We can't tell anybody. Can't tell anybody. We just dropped bombs on Japan. We don't want the Russians to get this technology. So Forrestal wanted disclosure in 1947. If you look into his story, he was committed to a nut house in 49. He, against his will, he was institutionalized in a mental hospital, and he was pushed out a window, and he was assassinated. If you read it, look into it, he was murdered. He was pushed out a window. He wanted to disclose. He was friends with JFK. There are all kinds of rumors that JFK was killed because he wanted to disclose aliens too. Well, that is he. I've been studying JFK for 45 years. The assassination. There's so there's so many theories, and who knows what exactly. But one
I
of the
just
best.
read Jesse Ventura's book on it, so I didn't even know like how in depth the theories were in the Umbrella Man and all that,
Yeah.
but it's quite interesting.
Oh yeah. I think I have 100 books. I read. Oh, here. This is going to blow you away. I love this one. I recently heard that Marilyn Monroe's death was part of the whole Kennedy assassination stuff, and here's why. Marilyn Monroe was having an affair with President Kennedy. Everyone knows this. And then he dumped her onto Bobby Kennedy, and she had an affair with him. Everyone knows this, common knowledge. Then Bobby Kennedy dumped her. She called Bobby Kennedy and said, "You guys are treating me like shit. I'm not happy with you. I'm going to do a press conference. I have a little red book. She had a little red diary. And she goes, I have a little red book. I have a lot of things that President Kennedy told me in bed that I'm going to go to the world and I'm going to do a press conference because you guys are pricks to me and I don't like being a piece of meat." There's a lot of evidence and a lot of proof and eyewitnesses, Devin, that Bobby Kennedy and his people killed Marilyn Monroe to shut her up. That's one part of this whole thing. But the other part is one of the things Marilyn Monroe was told by JFK was there's craft and bodies in Roswell, New Mexico, and he wanted to reveal that to the public. There are FBI documents that say that they heard her when they bugged her house, Marilyn Monroe, talking about JFK telling her, pillow talk, that there's aliens. So whoever killed JFK didn't want him to tell the world about aliens. They pushed Forrestal out of a building. They blew off JFK's head. Bobby Kennedy knew about aliens. They killed him. And then I think once maybe through Nixon, probably after Nixon, it tapered off. I know Reagan knew. Reagan knew about aliens. Dick Cheney knew about aliens. George Bush Sr. knew. He was the head of the CIA. When Jimmy Carter became president, this is a story Danny Sheehan says. Jimmy Carter became president. He saw a UFO in 1969. He went to George Bush Sr. At the time. George Bush was the head of the CIA. He said, I want to know about aliens and UFOs. Show me the files. George Bush Sr., the head of the CIA, said to the President of the United States, Mr. President, that's above your pay grade. You're not allowed to know that information. So some presidents, same with the Clintons, same with the Obamas, some people were told little tidbits. Some people were kept at arm's length. I don't think Biden knows. I don't think Biden knows the whole facts.
I
But
know Hillary probably would have disclosed. Biden doesn't seem to care at all about it. The one interesting thing about Trump, before he was president, I heard him asked about UFOs. He said he didn't believe it. He thought this was people confusing military craft and stuff. When he was president, he was saying he's seen the Roswell files and he finds them very interesting.
right.
Now he's trying to get reelected and he seems to be pushing that. So it seems like for the UFO people, between the two, Biden is not caring at all about this issue. But I'm not getting into anything other than that. But
No. I
Trump
totally,
seems
no,
interested.
I agree with you. I totally agree with you. I think when we spoke last time, you know, I think we talked about this last year. Everyone remembers there was that Chinese weather balloon that spied on continental United States, and everyone knew it was from China. Man-made balloon. We saw it on TV. We saw it flying from Montana, I think, to South Carolina into the ocean, and they retrieved it. Everyone saw that. We knew it was man-made. 2 weeks later, or a week later, there were 3 UFOs in the same week that the U.S. Air Force shot down. One was over Alaska, one was over Canada, one was over Lake Huron. President Biden went on TV after the third one. And Devin, I watched this live and I'm like, Joe, you can do it, man. This is the time. You just shot down 3 UFOs in a week. Just tell us the truth. Now's the time. You're going to be the disclosure president. I was watching. I'm like, this is it. I know he's going to do it right now. Well, we had the China balloon. And then, these 3 other things, they could have been a hobbyist balloon or some kids playing with a drone. We're really not sure what they were. We'll let you know. But the China balloon, it was deflection like a magician does when he does a trick with one hand, but he's really doing the trick with the other hand. Biden came so close. All he had to do that day was say, we've shot down 3 craft. They may have been extraterrestrial in nature. We're looking at them. We'll let you know. All he had to do was say a couple of words. He would have been the disclosure president. He came so close. And now I
And
think
then
perhaps.
everyone's asking him questions and he just stares at them for like 10 seconds and he
Yeah.
walks away.
Yeah, he doesn't want to answer. He just doesn't want. Now, does he know? First of all, if our Air Force is shooting down a craft with a $500,000 missile, there's film footage of that. Of course, there's video or film footage of that in detail. That's never, ever been released. You mean to tell me we never found those 3 craft on the ground? Of course we did. They've never been shown. The footage has never been revealed. The pilots of those craft have never been on TV. Biden never explained what they were. And then the press has amnesia. The press, every time, if I was a member of the press and I was at the White House and Joe Biden's talking about Gaza, I'd say, Mr. President, one last question, just real quick. Remember the 3 UFOs you shot down last year? Yeah. What happened? What were those? When can we see those? And he would just go, hum. Why is the media not asking him what they were? They were so high profile. How does the media have amnesia and not ask him what those 3 things were? That pisses me off. I'll tell you the truth.
Yeah, it's one thing that everyone just forgot about, but
How do you
very
forget, really?
interesting.
Right? How do you forget, really? How do you forget 3 UFOs? You don't have three in a decade. If we had we had three that in the same week over the same region of North America. How did CNN or the New York Times, how did they not hound the White House? Where are the pictures? Where's the film? We know you recovered them, Mr. President. Come on, nobody. Well, oh yeah, I guess they were balloons. Okay, I guess they were balloons. How do you? It's such a bullshit. So anyway,
They
maybe
only
Trump.
showed the fourth. They only showed the one, which was the fourth, and that was the weather balloon. So I
Right.
guess they just assumed, yes, we wasted missile money on 4 weather balloons, and one of them apparently they missed, and it actually took 2 missiles to take down somehow.
I didn't hear that. I didn't hear that. That's very cool. Yeah, they recovered them. There's film footage. The pilots, if they, you may know this. You probably know this. Chuck Schumer and I think his name is Mike Rounds or Mark Rounds. They have a Schumer Rounds legislation. They're trying to push it through Congress a second time. That will protect whistleblowers from to come forward. Danny Sheehan in Washington and my friend Steve Bassett, they've been working on that for years. If that ever were to get passed, whoever the president is, people can come forward and say, I shot down a UFO. I was inside one. I recovered technology. I recovered bodies. This is real. I know where they are. And they won't go to jail. They won't have their pensions taken away. The IRS won't steal their money. They won't, in the days of Roswell, the men in black came to the families of the Roswell people and said to them, if you tell anyone as long as you live, we will kill you and your family and we'll bury you in the desert. You'll never be found. There's all kinds of footage of those survivors saying those words as when they were little kids. They were all going to be killed. So we've come a long way and we're so close, but we're still not quite there. And you know what? Maybe if Trump does get, if he wins, maybe he would become the disclosure president. But I love what you said. Maybe Steve, I would much rather have it be Steven Spielberg than Donald Trump.
But here's one thing interesting. I just looked this up while we were talking about it. It's called the Chinese weather balloon incident. So now we like literally only are supposed to remember that there was one, and they don't even talk about the other
Yeah,
3 anymore. So
yeah,
there was 4 total, by the way, for anyone that's not familiar with this,
I know.
and the only one identified was this, and they just erased from everyone's memory the other 3.
That's why people are working for you are I am with the HDA, Danny and Stephen in Washington. We're all trying to put more light on this subject. Disclosure should happen. It should have happened already. Extraterrestrials visiting Earth. It's the biggest story in the history of mankind. Whether they created us, I think they created us. I think they've had a hand in human history. I'm a big believer that they helped Moses. I'm huge with this one, man. They parted the Red Sea. When Moses talked to God on Mount Sinai, he saw a burning bush. People think that was a craft. When he was gone for 40 days to get the 10 Commandments, when he came back down the mountain, he was glowing. Moses was glowing. And the best one, my favorite, is when the Israelites were walking through the desert, they lived on manna from heaven. Manna from heaven is food from heaven. Now, as far as I know, heaven doesn't rain food, but extraterrestrials in their little crafts could have created food for the Israelites to have survived. So I believe that ETs had a big hand with Moses. It's Eric von Daniken. It's ancient astronaut theory. I personally believe a lot of that. Then I spoke to Richard Dolan recently on my show, my podcast, and he said, Dan, I looked into that for years and years and years. I'm not convinced. I said, Richard, that's very interesting. Have you talked to Giorgio Tsoukalos about this? He goes, Giorgio and I disagree on this. I said, Richard, I would pay good money to see you and Giorgio on a stage debating the pros and cons of ancient alien theory. Would that be wonderful? I'd love to see that.
I was recently watching an interview with a military guy that had been abducted that believes that they're farming us for some reason. There's some reason that they want us to exist, and that's why they care about our environment and our nuclear bombs and stuff, because for some reason they need us for whatever, and they don't want us to self-extinct. but it's
Absolutely.
not
Well,
necessarily like something for the benefit of mankind. It might
right.
help us, but they really have a motive behind it that we might not be aware of.
Right, right. Well, I've heard that some species, and who knows if this is true, but some species want human blood. Like, right? Why they wouldn't want us extinct if they need human blood? They certainly wouldn't want us extinct. Steve Bassett thinks when disclosure happens, rainbows and unicorns, people dancing in the streets, hugging and kissing, and we know the truth, and everything's going to be great. And then my friend Nick Pope says, "Be careful what you wish for." He's heard that many races are demonic and evil, that perhaps why the US government hasn't told us for 80 years is because they don't want to scare us, because some of these races are very not pleasant and evil. And maybe, according to Nick, we may be better off not knowing, not knowing, you know? So, and I'm friends with both of these guys. Stephen wants it to happen yesterday. Nick Pope, I saw his lecture in February. He goes, be careful what you wish for, because if they're demonic, it's not going to be what we're all hoping for.
And he used to work for the British government. He was the head of their UFO desk. And
Yes.
another reason they could be doing it, and this makes actual sense too, because in a lot of these abduction cases, they're collecting semen or
Mm.
female reproductive stuff. They could be creating some type of hybrids that are slowly populating the planet
Or
or using
maybe,
them for
or
some other reason.
maybe their planet, right? Maybe their craft. I'm personal friends with two women who have been abducted in their early 20s. They were both impregnated, and then a few months later they were both abducted again, and they both lost their fetuses. Their doctor said, "Oh, well, you're not pregnant anymore." And they said, "What are you talking about? What do you mean I'm not pregnant anymore?" "Well, there's no baby in there." "How could there be no baby? I didn't have a miscarriage." So there are extraterrestrials. They I believe these are women I know very well. I'm friends with these people. I believe them. I know a lot of people who are a little bit weird and wacky and fringy and woo woo. That's fine, man. It takes all kinds of people to be in a world. I love creative people, but I know people that are really very serious, and they've had very intense experiences. And these two women in particular are very good friends of mine. And they're telling me, Dan, this happened. I'm not dreaming this. This happened. I was devastated. I lost my child. So, Devin, and then I have a good friend named Mark in the Bay Area. He's 60 years old. From the age of 5, every few years, he's been getting abducted by beautiful, gorgeous Pleiadians. He calls them the light people. He says they literally, men and women, they're like 7 feet tall, long blonde hair. He said they're so beautiful when you look at them you have tears in your eyes. So they're physically so beautiful. And he said they've been nurturing him since the age of 5, every few years. And they told him about solar energy and why that's important. They told him this 10 years ago. Today, for the last 10 years, he's been working with Native American Indians across the southwest of the United States, providing solar energy to Native American Indians. And he's making millions and millions of dollars doing so. And the extraterrestrials steered him in that positive direction. So I have friends who've had terrible experiences, and my friend Mark has had wonderful experiences. It just, what that points to is there's very, very likely different races. Some are good, some are bad, some are neutral. And we'll see. If we all live long enough to see disclosure, I guess we'll know. And maybe it's going to be Trump or Biden or Spielberg or somebody else. But my mother turns 90 in October. My mother, 90 in October, and I've explained to her disclosure, and she says, "Danny, I hope I live to see disclosure." And I said, "Mom, I hope you live that long too."
It should be interesting, and let's hear about your books one last time before we
Sure,
close off here.
sure.
They
So
are
these are
available on your website.
They're available on my website and, of course, Amazon. Amazon, Amazon, Amazon. So my two new books, My Paranormal Life and Five, a Novella. Those are the two brand new ones. Also check out my earlier ones, Flirting with Fame. That's my Hollywood book. And my other book, After They Came. That's the book that got me into ufology and made me friends with great people, including you. So, Yeah, and Dan Harary, author. That's everything you'd want. It's more than anyone would even, including me, more than anyone want to know about me. It's enough already with me. Yeah, I'm getting sick of myself at this point.
Yeah, I hope it's not too much about the sex addiction stuff.
That's the well. It's one of the 5 books. I wrote it. I did some sex podcasts about how you listen. At the time, I had just gotten divorced. Right, I had just gotten divorced. I was making a ton of money. And I was dating women, and then on the side, I was doing extracurricular things with sex. It's for a while, I couldn't, I just, 20, it was 20 years. I couldn't get enough. That's really what it was about. And, when you make a lot of money and your kids then are off in college and you're a single guy in Beverly Hills with a Mercedes and a good job and you own a successful company, there's a lot of temptation. So that's really what I'm not ashamed of
I
it.
don't feel bad for you on that at all.
I'm not ashamed of it. I'm not proud of it. I'm not ashamed of it. I'm glad I wrote it. It got it out of my system, and now I don't have to think of it. And my mother goes, "Can I read your sex book?" And I said, "Mom, no." I said, "If I die before you, you can read it, but you're not reading that book while I'm alive." And I told my daughter the same thing.
Yeah, I don't even want my parents to read my
Oh my God.
biography book that I'm putting out. But the last thing I got to ask you, and you talking about Hollywood reminded me,
Yeah,
I like Howard Stern as an interviewer,
me
and I'm a
too.
fan
Me
of his
too.
and stuff.
Yeah.
What could you tell me about going to college with Howard Stern since you brought that up earlier?
I didn't know him then. He was 2 years older than me, but I remember him on the radio early in the mornings. He was a wacky. He was Howard Stern then, man. This is 70. He graduated college in 76, Boston University. I graduated 78. But he had a wacky, funny show. I think it was on from 6 to 8 a.m. every morning, weekday. Very, very funny, and he's farting. He's farting into the microphone and doing wacky off the wall stuff. And I remember my friends and I going, God, this guy's just a whack job. What's going on with him? I met him in Hollywood 10 years later, and he was still not yet famous. I had booked Freddy Krueger as a friend of mine, Robert Englund, the actor. I was working with him at the time. I booked him on Howard Stern. Howard used to come out to Hollywood a few times a year in the 80s to do a live show from Hollywood. So when I met Howard, I said, "Hey, Howard, you and I went to BU together." He goes, "What year did you graduate?" I told him, I said, "Howard, you're 2 years older than me." He goes, "Did we party together?" I said, "I don't think so. You're older than me." He goes, "Did we know any mutual friends?" I don't think so. So it was a short conversation. But I remember him walking around we both went to the College of Communications. He's 6'5", I think, or 6'4". So Devin, I mean, this super tall guy with the Jewish Jewfro hair. I used to see him walking around. So if you had told me he'd become, look, I worked with Bruce Springsteen in '73. If you had told me Bruce was going to become famous 2 years later, I never would have believed you. And I knew Jerry Seinfeld 10 years before he got the Seinfeld TV show. So, certain people cross your path when it's meant to. But Howard was a very nice guy. Jay Leno, very nice guy. Jerry, I can't say very nice things about.
Well, he did stick up for Kramer after Kramer's rant for whatever that says about him, but
Yeah, he
that
did.
does
Yeah,
say something about the friendship, but that was pretty bad. That happened in your neck of the woods too.
it did. I remember that very well. Yeah,
And
he'll
I don't
never.
even think he was drunk or anything when he did that.
No, yeah, he was bombing. He was having. There was a big article in the LA Times about this very recently. He was not doing well. He was not doing well that night as a stand-up comic. It was at the Laugh Factory on Sunset Boulevard, and some people in the audience were saying, "Kramer, you suck. Get off the stage, Kramer. You're not funny. You suck." And they happened to be African American, and boy, did he turn! Did he turn? And boy, he'll regret that forever. That's a hard thing to come back from. That was a huge mistake.
Luckily, he's got enough residuals. That show is still airing. He never has to work again.
Yeah, but
And
he
he
didn't
never
get.
will work again.
Yeah, he didn't get Jerry money or Larry David money. Those guys got built.
Yeah.
They got built the billions. The other ones got tens of millions. Jerry got $1 billion. Larry got $500 million. The others probably each got tens of millions. That's not bad. Not bad. But yeah, he never. Remember Pee Wee Herman? What he did, right? Pee Wee Herman
Yeah,
came
thank
back.
God he came back. Yeah, thank
What?
God. That
What?
wouldn't even be a thing today.
Yeah,
I
I think
mean,
people would laugh. He would laugh about it. Say, you know what? I'm an idiot. I'm an idiot. Remember Hugh Grant went on Jay Leno and he goes, yeah, I'm an idiot. And he embraced it. He didn't hide it. He said, I screwed up. I made an unbelievable mistake. And then Hugh Grant didn't miss a beat. He didn't lose any gigs or anything. If you screw up at that level, you have to apologize. There are publicists, I don't do this, but there's crisis management publicists all over the world. You screw up badly, you get caught with a hooker, you get caught with drugs, there's inappropriate film or video or something, you doing something really heinous and awful. You got to say, look, I was an addict. I made an unbelievable mistake. I've apologized to my family. This is what Bill Clinton should have done, man. Bill Clinton, all he had to do, I made a terrible mistake. I've apologized to my family. I apologize to the American people. I never, ever should have done what I did. He wouldn't have been impeached. It would have blown over in 2 months, would have changed all of history.
people love him now anyways. Now he's like an icon for doing that. But at
Yeah,
the time, it was,
well, but look, JFK. JFK had women. There were secret hiding rooms in the White House. The press corps in JFK's day. I've studied JFK extensively. That was like a real men's club. They were like, Mr. President, you're so cool, man. This blonde out there in the audience, she wants you. I'll bring her back. And the Secret Service helped him. The media looked away. He went to parties, women throwing themselves at him. His wife wasn't with him all the time. Everywhere he went, women throwing, and his people protected him. And that was not going to be in the New York Times that JFK was cheating on Jackie. That was not going to happen in that period of time. Now, anyone has a pimple on your nose, it's the front page of Time magazine. So.
yeah, well, I guess presidents have groupies as we go back to the groupies talk. But
Right.
I'll let you close this down with whatever you said. Someone says it's an awesome interview. I appreciate it. Dan
Thank you.
appreciates it. You can get
Yeah.
his book through the website or Amazon, and hopefully, I'm sure I'll talk to you before then. But I want to be in Palm Springs, if for no other reason than to say I've gone to Palm Springs
Well, a year.
next year.
You have a year to save up your pennies, right?
Yeah, I just had to go through something that cost me a fortune, but now things are back on the upswing,
Good,
and I'll
good.
be
Now,
booming by that time.
I'd love to meet you and introduce you around. I'll do an email intro for you with Alexandra Holzer, because if you want to do a really good ghost show, man, she knows the history of ghosts in America. She's like an authority. I'll hook you up with that. And anytime you want somebody that I might know, I can hook you up with guests. I'm glad to.